I found out my family thinks I'm the backup son and it explains everything. I'm a 26-year-old guy, and for most of my life, I thought I was just imagining things when it came to how my family treated me. I'm the middle child sandwiched between my older sister Natalie and my younger sister Lily. Growing up, I thought every family had a favorite and that it was just normal for the middle kid to fly under the radar a little more. It wasn't until a few months ago that I realized it wasn't just my imagination. It was something a lot deeper and a lot more deliberate than I ever wanted to admit. When we were kids, Natalie always got the best of everything. At Christmas, she would get the newest gadgets while I'd get something basic like socks or a backpack. For birthdays, she had big parties with all our relatives showing up, while mine usually got lumped into a family dinner at home. Natalie got to choose where we went for summer vacations. If she picked the beach, we went to the beach. If she wanted the mountains, we packed up and headed for the mountains. No one ever asked me or Lily what we wanted. Family gatherings were the worst. I remember sitting around at Thanksgiving or Christmas, and every conversation would somehow circle back to Natalie's latest accomplishment. She made honor roll. She got a part in a school play. She won a local sports tournament. Everyone clapped and fussed over her. Meanwhile, if I so much as mentioned something I was proud of, it would get a half-hearted "that's nice" before the focus snapped right back to Natalie. If Lily so much as drew a crayon doodle, everyone fawned over it like she had painted the Mona Lisa. I learned pretty early that if I wanted praise, I'd have to get it somewhere else because it wasn't coming from home. By the time high school rolled around, the pattern was set. Natalie got a car for her 16th birthday paid for by my parents. When I turned 16, I was told if I wanted one, I'd need to get a job and buy it myself, so I did. I worked evenings and weekends at a grocery store and saved up enough to buy a beat-up old sedan. When I started looking at colleges, my parents sat down with Natalie to plan her applications, offered to pay her tuition, even toured schools with her. When it was my turn, I got a pat on the back and a good luck. I ended up juggling student loans and part-time work just to get through school. The message was clear even back then. Natalie was the priority. I was there in case they needed someone to fill in the gaps. When Natalie didn't feel like coming to family events, they would call me to make sure someone showed up. When Natalie forgot to help around the house, I was expected to step in without complaint. If Natalie messed something up, it was explained away. She's just under a lot of pressure or she didn't mean it. If I made even a small mistake, there were long lectures about responsibility and setting a good example. It didn't get better when we grew up. Family dinners still felt the same. Natalie would sit with the adults at the main table, getting pulled into every important conversation. I'd end up with the kids and cousins at the side table even though I was already working full-time by then. Big family decisions, things like selling the family house, moving our parents into a retirement community, handling family heirlooms would be made without me. I'd get a text after everything was already decided, usually framed like they were doing me a favor by keeping things simple. I probably would have kept brushing it off if it hadn't been for Claire. Claire's been my girlfriend for 3 years now, and she comes from a totally different kind of family, one where everyone actually listens to each other and respect isn't handed out based on some invisible ranking. After attending a few family events with me, Claire pointed out how I was basically treated like an afterthought. At first, I laughed it off. I told her that's just how it is. But the more I watched, the more I realized she was right. Claire encouraged me to start setting small boundaries. If they called me last minute to help move something or fix something Natalie didn't want to deal with, I started saying no. If they tried to drag me into drama between relatives, I stayed out of it. I paid closer attention to how conversations played out, who got included, and who got brushed aside. For a while, I kept telling myself it wasn't that big of a deal. Maybe it was just firstborn privilege. Maybe it was just the way families fall into old habits. Maybe I was too sensitive. I tried to rationalize it every way I could. But then something happened that made it impossible to keep pretending. It wasn't a huge dramatic blowout or a screaming match. Just a small careless comment that made everything clear. It was something small, almost casual. The kind of thing that slips out when people get too comfortable. And once I heard it, there was no going back. It was the moment that snapped everything into focus and made me realize that being the backup son wasn't just a feeling I had. It was the role they had quietly assigned to me a long time ago. I'm not sharing this because I want sympathy or because I hate my family. I don't. I'm just tired of pretending like it didn't happen. Tired of pretending like it doesn't hurt. This is just my story, and it's about what happens when you finally realize you've been treated like an option instead of a priority your whole life and what you decide to do about it. A couple of weeks after that small but brutal moment that made everything click for me, something happened that pretty much sealed it. I found out about my father's surprise 60th birthday party through a forwarded message, not from my parents, not even from Natalie. It was an aunt who sent me a text that looked like it had already been passed around several times. There was no personal message attached, just the event details and a casual hope you can make it. Claire and I showed up anyway, mainly because I didn't want to give them more ammo to claim I didn't care. We got to the venue early and immediately noticed something weird. Almost everyone from my immediate family to distant cousins was wearing matching navy blue outfits, full-on coordination. Meanwhile, Claire and I stood there in regular clothes, sticking out like sore thumbs. No one had bothered to mention anything about a dress code. Trying to shrug it off, we grabbed a table in the corner. The night got even better when they rolled out a big slideshow presentation. It was supposed to be a celebration of my father's life, but somehow, Natalie ended up being the main star. Photo after photo of Natalie's milestones flashed on the screen. Natalie winning awards, Natalie graduating, Natalie getting promoted. I showed up in maybe 3 pictures total, and 2 of them were in group shots where you could barely even see me. Claire squeezed my hand under the table, but didn't say anything. Then came the speeches. Every relative who stood up to say something ended up talking about Natalie. How proud Dad was of her, how she carried the family name with honor, how she was the future. Some people mentioned Lily briefly because she's the baby of the family and people still see her as cute. When it came to me, there was maybe a quick awkward and, of course, Ethan too, and then right back to Natalie's achievements. After the party, Claire and I went back to my place, and she finally said what we were both thinking. She told me flat out that none of this was an accident. It wasn't random. It wasn't just me imagining things. It was a pattern, and it had been happening right in front of me the whole time. Claire suggested I stop brushing it under the rug and maybe talk to my parents directly. A few days later, I invited my mother out for lunch. Nothing fancy, just a quiet cafe where we could actually talk without distractions. We ordered food, made small talk for a few minutes, and then I eased into it. I asked her if she had noticed that I always seemed to be an afterthought at family events. She looked uncomfortable right away, but didn't say much. I brought up the birthday party, how I hadn't even been properly invited, how no one told me about the coordinated outfits, how the whole thing had been a Natalie parade. She tried to laugh it off at first, saying that I was being sensitive. But when I pressed a little more, she slipped. She said, "Natalie is the future of this family, but it's reassuring to know you're there if needed." The second she said it, she seemed to realize how bad it sounded. She fumbled to cover it up saying that she didn't mean it like that and that all her kids were important, but she never actually denied it. She never said I was wrong. She never said that I wasn't just their backup plan. Later that night, I texted Lily. I wasn't expecting much. She's always been closer to our parents, being the youngest and all. But when I told her what had happened, she got quiet. Then she admitted something I didn't expect. She said that when she was younger, she overheard our parents talking about Natalie being the main investment and me being the dependable backup. Apparently, they had said that it was comforting to know I would always be steady even if Natalie's plans didn't work out. Hearing it from Lily made everything hit harder. It wasn't just the birthday party. It wasn't just Claire seeing things I didn't want to see. This had been real all along. I had spent my whole life playing a role they assigned to me without even telling me. I didn't confront my parents right away after that. I decided to try a different approach. Normally, whenever they needed something, setting up furniture, helping with tech problems, running errands, I was the first one they called, and I always showed up. No questions asked. I wanted to see what would happen if I didn't. Sure enough, it didn't take long. Within a few days, my mother texted me asking if I could come by to move a heavy cabinet because Natalie was so busy with work. I told her I already had plans and couldn't make it. The next day, Dad called asking if I could help fix his car's flat tire because Natalie was out of town. Again, I said I was tied up. Each time, the requests were framed like I was their second choice. Not because they needed me, but because Natalie wasn't available. After that, the tone of their messages changed. Less direct, more layered with guilt. Things like, "It's sad when family doesn't come through anymore," or "We miss the old days when everyone helped out," but they never directly mentioned Natalie's absence. They never apologized for treating me like the fallback plan. They just wanted me to quietly fall back into line. I didn't. I kept my distance. I answered messages politely when needed, but made sure I was no longer the first one to jump at every small crisis. If Natalie was the future of the family, then they could lean on her for a change. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel guilty about it. After I started turning down every last-minute request from my parents, the changes became obvious fast. I stopped dropping by their house just to see if they needed anything. I didn't offer to fix their internet when it went down or mow their lawn when Natalie was too busy. I made myself available only when it made sense, not just because they expected it. At first, my parents didn't say anything directly. Instead, they started sending group messages in the family chat. Things like, "Some of us still remember when family meant showing up for each other," or "Sad how things change when people forget where they come from." Claire pointed them out whenever they popped up, but I didn't respond. It was clear they were hoping I would feel guilty enough to slide right back into my old role. Meanwhile, Natalie kept living her golden girl life. She hosted barbecues and posted about Family First on social media, but when it came to anything that involved actual work, the requests still somehow ended up aimed at me. If their garage needed clearing or their attic needed organizing, Natalie's name was never even brought up. It was always a call or text from me, phrased like they were doing me the honor of asking. Each time I politely declined, not rudely, not angrily. Just a simple "sorry, I'm not available for that." And then I moved on with my day. After a few weeks, Claire sat me down and said that if I was serious about changing the dynamic, it was probably time to stop letting things stay so vague. She suggested a clear conversation, one where I laid it all out calmly and firmly without expecting them to magically change. So that weekend, I invited my parents over to my apartment. I made coffee, set out some snacks, and kept the TV off. No distractions. I thanked them for coming, then went straight into it. I explained that I had always noticed the differences in how they treated me versus Natalie and Lily. I told them about the birthday party, about how I found out from an aunt, and wasn't even included in the group plans. I brought up the slideshow where I barely existed and how their speeches barely acknowledged me at all. I said it as plainly as I could that I had been treated like the backup option my whole life, that my help and attention only seemed valuable when Natalie wasn't around or wasn't interested, that I was expected to pick up slack without complaint while Natalie was celebrated for doing the bare minimum. My father leaned back in his chair and waved his hand like he was brushing away a fly. He said I was overthinking things and that families aren't perfect. He joked that at least I wasn't the one under constant pressure to perform like Natalie was. He didn't acknowledge a single point I made. My mother didn't even argue. She sat there quietly, stirring her coffee, occasionally nodding like she was listening, but never stepping in to either support or deny what I was saying. It was like she was waiting for it to blow over. I stayed calm. I didn't shout. I didn't accuse. I gave them examples. The Christmases, the vacations, the college support, the emergencies where I was always second call after Natalie flaked. Every time they tried to bring up some happy memory, sometime we all had ice cream after a soccer game or a photo of us all smiling on vacation, I pointed out that those moments didn't erase a lifetime of being treated as an afterthought. By the end of it, it was obvious they weren't going to change. Not because they didn't understand, but because they didn't want to. My father said something about kids today being too sensitive, and my mother just sighed like the whole thing was exhausting for her. I thanked them for coming, showed them to the door, and didn't chase after them when they left without much more than a polite goodbye. A few hours later, my phone rang. It was Natalie. I didn't even need to answer to know how that call was going to go, but I picked up anyway just to hear it for myself. Natalie immediately jumped into accusing me of dividing the family and making drama out of nothing. She said I was being selfish for even bringing it up. She said our parents loved all of us equally and that I was looking for reasons to be bitter. She didn't ask what had happened or how I felt. She didn't care. The only thing that mattered to her was keeping everything exactly how it had always been, with her in the center and me quietly holding up the edges where no one noticed. I didn't argue. I just let her talk until she ran out of steam, said goodbye, and hung up. After that, it became even clearer to me. Natalie wasn't ever going to take on more responsibility. She wasn't going to suddenly realize the unfairness and offer to share the burden. It was easier for her if I stayed quiet and did what I was told. The only real change was going to come from me, not from waiting for them to wake up and treat me better, but from stepping away and refusing to play the part they had assigned me without my consent. And this time, I was ready to do exactly that. The call with Natalie was the last straw. Right after we hung up, I decided to no longer answer any calls or messages from her. I figured if she ever had anything important to say, she could go through someone else. I didn't announce it. I didn't make a scene about it. I just did it and moved on. Claire suggested we get out of town for a few days just to clear my head and put some distance between everything. We booked a last-minute cabin rental 2 hours away, packed up the car, and left the next morning. During the drive, my phone buzzed a few times with calls from my parents, but I let them go to voicemail and muted the notifications. The cabin was small but perfect. It had a porch overlooking a lake and no one around for miles. We hiked, grilled dinner, and sat outside watching the sunset. For the first time in a long time, there were no guilt trips hanging over my head. No silent expectations creeping in, just peace. When we got back 3 days later, I found out from Lily that Natalie had been busy while I was gone. Apparently, she had contacted several relatives, telling them I was distancing myself from the family and hurting Mom and Dad with my selfishness. Lily said a few cousins had already started whispering about it, asking what was going on. I thanked her for letting me know, but didn't bother defending myself to anyone. A few days after that, my parents invited me to what they called a family dinner. The message was framed like they wanted to patch things up. Claire warned me that it smelled like a setup, but I agreed to go anyway. I wanted to hear them out just in case there was a real attempt to mend things. When Claire and I arrived, it was clear within minutes that it wasn't about reconciliation at all. The mood was heavy. Plates were already set, but nobody touched the food. Instead, my father started talking about loyalty, gratitude, and how disappointed they were in the way I had turned my back on the family. My mother sat beside him, dabbing at her eyes with a napkin every few minutes, but saying very little. Natalie was there too, of course, sitting at the head of the table like she was running the show. Every time I tried to explain why I'd felt sidelined all these years, they talked over me. They threw around phrases like blood is thicker than water and families stick together, but none of it addressed the real issues. It was just about keeping up appearances and making sure I stayed in my assigned role. When I stood up to leave, Natalie got up too, moving as if she was going to block my way. It wasn't a full confrontation, but she stood there just long enough to make her point. I didn't react. I walked around her, grabbed Claire's hand, and left through the side door without another word. Later that night, I sent a clear and respectful message to my parents. I told them that I would not be attending any future family events that were presented under false pretenses. If they wanted to talk to me, it would need to be genuine, not a trap. I said I would be keeping my distance for the foreseeable future and wished them well. After that, I minimized contact across the board. I didn't block my parents, but I only answered messages if they were direct and necessary. Group chats were muted. I stopped sending holiday plans, checking in, or volunteering for anything. If they reached out, I responded politely but briefly. No extra explanations. No emotional openings. Claire backed me the whole way. She kept reminding me that setting boundaries was not the same as being cruel. If anything, it was giving them the opportunity to realize the weight of the relationship they had built or failed to build with me. In the background, Natalie kept stirring things up with other relatives. I heard from Lily that she was telling people I was going through something and that they should pray for me. I never corrected the rumors. I figured if they believed it without asking me directly, they were not people I needed to explain myself to anyway. I started noticing other changes too. My energy at work picked up. I had more time to focus on my projects, more mental space to plan future moves. Claire and I began talking about finding a new place to live, one further from the constant pull of family obligations. I had always been the reliable one, the one who showed up, fixed things, solved problems. It was strange, at first, stepping back and watching the gaps form where I used to be. But the truth was, those gaps were never mine to fill in the first place. They had just gotten used to me doing it without being asked. For the first time, I was letting the chips fall where they may, and I wasn't rushing in to catch them before they hit the ground. It did not take long after I pulled back from my parents to find new ways to try and get to me. When direct calls and messages stopped working, they started using Lily to pass along their guilt trips. She would casually mention during visits that mom and dad missed me or that dad was upset I was not around to help with this or that. It was never a direct request. Just little comments dropped into conversation to remind me of the role I was supposed to play. I told Lily she did not have to be the messenger. If our parents had something important to say, they could reach out themselves. I made sure she knew I did not blame her and that she was not responsible for fixing anything between me and them. Claire suggested it might be a good time for a bigger change. She found a few listings for apartments farther away from my parents' area, and we spent a couple weekends visiting different places. We found one we liked, a small, quiet apartment complex about an hour away, close enough if needed but far enough to make unplanned drop-ins unlikely. We signed the lease without telling anyone. The move was done in a single weekend with the help of a few friends. No big announcement. No family invite, just a clean break. During the move, a few handwritten letters arrived at my old apartment. They were from my parents. Each letter was packed with emotional language about how families should stick together and how they missed the so-called good old days. But there was no real apology, no acknowledgement of how they had treated me. Just nostalgia carefully edited to erase the parts that hurt. Claire and I read through a few, then boxed the rest without replying. Work started getting better too. Without the constant background stress, I found myself more focused. I got called into my manager's office a few weeks later and was offered a leadership project that would have been impossible to handle if I were still tied down by family obligations every other weekend. Then came a surprise visit from an uncle I had not seen in months. He stopped by my new place without warning, saying he just happened to be in the area. We sat outside for a few minutes while he made a few not so subtle comments about how everyone misses the way things used to be and how someone has to be the bigger man. I thanked him for stopping by, but made it clear that I was not interested in pretending everything was fine just to keep the peace. After he left, I chose to stop answering his calls and messages just to keep the pattern from repeating. Around this time, Natalie announced her engagement. I found out the same way most people did, a mass message sent out to the family group chat. There was no personal invitation, no direct message to me. Just an announcement with a smiling photo of her and her fiancé flashing her ring. A few days later, my parents started hinting through Lily that they expected me to be heavily involved in the wedding, be part of the groom's party, give a speech, help with family arrangements, everything. Before anything could gain momentum, I sent a clear and polite message back. I said I would attend the wedding if properly invited, but I would not be taking on any roles or responsibilities. I wanted to be a guest, nothing more. Natalie's fiancé did not take that well. A few hours after my message, I found out that he sent a long dramatic message about how family support is important and how I was disrespecting not just Natalie but the entire family legacy. I did not engage. I decided not to respond to his message and moved on. There was nothing else to discuss and nothing worth arguing about. Cutting off the old ways one person at a time was freeing. Each block number, each decision to not answer a guilt-laden message made the air around me a little clearer. Claire and I spent weekends exploring parks near our new place, trying new restaurants, and just enjoying a life that was not built around waiting for the next family emergency. With each week that passed, it became more obvious that what my parents and Natalie missed was not me. They missed the version of me that quietly filled every gap, solved every problem, and never asked for anything in return. Without that version of me available, they were left with the situation they had created. One where they had to either fix their own problems or lean harder on each other. And for the first time, I had no interest in stepping back in to save them. Not out of anger, not out of revenge, just out of understanding. Some relationships only work when one person carries the weight. And when that person stops, the cracks show faster than anyone wants to admit. After a few months of careful planning, I signed the lease for a new apartment nearly an hour away from my parents' area. I did it quietly. No family announcements, no invitations for advice, just the paperwork and a fresh set of keys in my hand. Claire and a few close friends helped with the move. We kept it quick and simple, loading everything into a couple of trucks and clearing out the old place in one day. I chose not to share my new address with my parents. If they wanted to find me, they would have to call first and ask. During the move, I missed a call from my mother. Claire caught it before I did and suggested letting it go to voicemail. I agreed. Later, I played the voicemail. It was everything I expected. Emotional language about how I was turning my back on the family, mixed with memories of when I used to be so dependable. There was no apology, no acknowledgement of why I might have chosen to move away. I deleted the voicemail without responding. The first few nights in the new apartment were different. Quiet in a good way. No one dropping by unannounced. No background tension about what favor would be asked next. For the first time in a long time, I could plan my weekends without wondering what emergency was going to pop up. Claire and I set up the living room exactly how we wanted it, bought a few new plants, and made the place feel like ours. A week after settling in, Lily texted and asked if she could visit. She showed up carrying a small plant as a housewarming gift. When she walked in, she looked around and said she had not seen me this relaxed in years. We sat on the balcony with coffee, and after a while, Lily admitted she had noticed the favoritism too, even if she had been shielded from the worst of it. She said she had felt pressured to be the peacemaker for as long as she could remember, but was not ready to confront our parents directly. I told her she didn't have to. I made it clear that whatever pace she chose was fine with me and that I wasn't keeping score. Meanwhile, news about Natalie's wedding plans started picking up. Word got around through mutual acquaintances that my parents were encouraging everyone to help heal the rift before the wedding. A few people I had not spoken to in years reached out, pretending it was just casual conversation before dropping lines about how important family unity was. It was easy to see through. I ignored most of it. To avoid any confusion, I sent a simple firm message in the family group chat. I wrote that I would attend Natalie's wedding as a guest if properly invited, but would not be taking on any special roles, speeches, or responsibilities. I kept it polite, but crystal clear. Natalie replied almost immediately. She sent a long angry message in the group chat about how I was making everything about myself and embarrassing the family. I ignored the conversation without replying. I was not going to argue with her, and I was not going to defend my choice. I had said what needed to be said, and that was enough. After that, my parents tried one more time. They sent a few private texts framed like friendly reminders about the importance of appearances and keeping family traditions alive. I responded each time with the same sentence. I would attend respectfully as a guest, but would not take on any duties. No arguments. No extra explanations. Claire noticed the difference in me. One night, after another round of family pressure had been quietly sidestepped, she surprised me with a homemade dinner and a small cake that said, "Choosing yourself." It was a simple celebration, just the two of us, but it felt bigger than any family party I had ever attended. The more distance I put between myself and the old family dynamics, the clearer everything became. Setting boundaries did not ruin relationships. It simply showed who valued you when they could no longer control you. Some people adjusted, some people disappeared, and some people just got louder because they hated losing the free labor, attention and emotional energy they had come to expect. With the wedding getting closer, I started preparing myself, not for drama, not for reconciliation, but just to observe. To see everything for what it was without getting pulled back into old roles. I knew it was going to be uncomfortable. I knew there would be whispers and judgment and probably a few cold shoulders, but none of that mattered anymore. This time, I would be there on my own terms, not as the backup plan, not as the fixer, just as a man who finally knew where he stood and who was done pretending otherwise. The wedding invitation arrived 2 weeks before the event. It was addressed to me and Claire together. No special lettering. No personal note tucked inside. Just a plain card listing us as regular guests, not part of the wedding party. There was no surprise there. I RSVP'd the next day, keeping it short and neutral. No emotional messages. No extra questions. Just confirmation that we would be there. In the days leading up to the wedding, my parents sent a few texts with logistical information, parking instructions, ceremony time, directions to the venue. The messages were short and cold, almost like automated reminders. I answered when necessary, sticking to the facts, never opening the door for any emotional conversation. Claire and I talked through everything before the day arrived. We decided we would stay low-key, stick together, and leave when it made sense. I picked out a simple gray suit, nothing flashy, nothing that would draw attention. Claire wore a classic navy dress. We planned to blend into the crowd as much as possible. On the wedding day, we arrived early. The venue was a large rented hall decorated in white and gold, full of carefully arranged tables and flower centerpieces. We found seats toward the back, away from the immediate family rows. No one stopped us. No one insisted we come forward. A few glances from my parents, nothing more. Claire and I sat quietly, watching the room fill up. The ceremony itself was exactly what I expected. Natalie stood at the front with her bridesmaids, laughing and sharing inside jokes. The officiant spent a few minutes talking about the strength of family bonds, sprinkling in little anecdotes clearly pulled from Natalie's life story. I caught a few relatives glancing over at me like they expected some kind of reaction. I just kept my face neutral. After the ceremony, while people were mingling before the reception started, a few distant relatives came over. Their comments were awkward at best. Things like family sticks together no matter what, or it is important to let the past go. I answered politely, nodded when necessary, and kept the conversation short. No arguments. No explanations. The reception started with a dinner. Claire and I ate quietly at our table while the rest of the family circled around Natalie and her husband like planets orbiting the sun. Every toast, every congratulatory speech circled back to Natalie being the anchor of the family or the future of the family legacy. There were dozens of references to everyone who has always been there, a list that clearly did not include me. No one said my name once. Natalie gave a speech too. Halfway through, she made a pointed comment, thanking those who always showed up without needing reminders or rewards. A few people chuckled. I glanced at Claire, who squeezed my hand under the table. We both knew who that dig was aimed at. We finished our meals without rushing, waited politely for the first dance to start, and then quietly slipped out before the real party got going. We walked straight to the car without saying any personal goodbyes. No dramatic exits. No loud statements. Just two people leaving a place where they were not really welcome. Claire drove us home while we played music and talked about anything other than family. The next morning, I woke up to a text from my parents. It simply said, "Thank you for attending. Hope you reflect." No warmth. No invitation to talk. Just a cold note trying to make me feel like I was the one who had something to think about. There was nothing to reflect on. I had not caused a scene. I had not embarrassed anyone. I had shown up, been respectful, and left without adding to their stories about how difficult I was. All I had done was refuse to play the background role they had always assigned to me. Claire suggested we take a short weekend trip, and we booked a small cabin by the coast. We spent the weekend hiking trails, eating seafood from food trucks, and watching the ocean crash against the rocks. No family discussions, no wedding recaps, just peace earned and guarded carefully. Standing on the cliffs watching the sunset that night, I realized how different everything felt now. There were no fights left to have, no explanations left to give, no secret wish that they would suddenly see me differently. All of that had been packed up and left behind, along with the old apartment, the old habits, and the old expectations. The only thing left now was my own life, the one I had built without their permission and the one I planned to keep building no matter who noticed or who approved. After the wedding, communication with my parents shifted into something that felt more like a formality than anything real. They sent a few holiday greetings, short and cold, and the occasional check-in around birthdays or major holidays. No warmth, no real effort to reconnect in any meaningful way. I answered when needed, but never initiated the conversation first. Natalie and her husband threw a couple of gatherings over the next few months, housewarming parties, birthday dinners, a baby shower announcement later on, but I was not invited to any of them. The invitations were posted publicly on social media or shared in family group chats I was no longer active in. It would have been easy to feel bitter about it, but honestly, I just made a mental note and moved on. It said more about where I stood in their minds than anything else ever could. Lily kept visiting though. She would come over after work, sometimes bringing takeout or a batch of cookies she had baked. Over time, she started opening up more about her own experiences. She admitted she had often felt like an accessory to Natalie's spotlight. Someone praised when it was convenient, but ignored when she tried to carve her own path. Outside of family, my life was thriving. At work, I was offered a leadership role on a major project. It came with a pay raise and more responsibility, but also recognition. For once, my efforts were being seen and valued without strings attached. I enrolled part-time in an MBA program, something I'd wanted to do for years but always put off because of family obligations. With every passing week, I focused more on the life Claire and I were building. We adopted a rescue dog named Max who fit right into our routines. It felt good to pour energy into something that gave love back without conditions or expectations. As things improved, I noticed something important. I no longer felt the need to win back my family. I was not waiting for apologies or hoping for a sudden change. I was simply living my life. The validation I used to chase was no longer important. The milestones that used to feel hollow without their approval now felt full because they were for me, not for them. The idea of family changed in my mind too. It became less about blood ties and more about the people who showed up consistently without needing me to play a part. People like Claire, a few old friends who had stuck around, even the family friend who had reached out quietly just to say she saw me. For the first time, my definition of family was something I chose, something that grew out of mutual respect and steady support. Not guilt, obligation, or expectation. Max curled up at my feet one night while Claire and I watched a movie, and I realized that this quiet, simple life I was building was the real prize. Not a seat at Natalie's table or a text from my parents, just a life where being seen and respected wasn't something I had to earn. It was something that happened naturally every day. I closed the chapter not with anger or resentment, but with something I had fought hard to build, freedom. And for the first time in my life, I knew it was enough.